The best class I took in college was a business skills class. And in that class, I learned how to do a feasibility study. First thing you do in a feasibility study is define your business. Simply just say what your business is. If you're a recording studio, say, I am a recording studio. You're going to have to list your services and your products, but don't list all of the services and products you could do. List them in two categories. The ones that you can go to market to the day you open your door, and what are the ones that you could provide in the future. And the reason why we separate the two is because the ones you can service today, you can tangibly put together into your revenue projections, and the ones you can do tomorrow go into your goals and objectives and future investments, because that also requires capital and expenses, which get put against your net profit or loss in your revenue projection. So you want to identify the two. What can you service today? What can you service tomorrow? Okay? Two lists. Now, with that, you want to say, what are your objectives in the first 12 months? Now, here's just a personal thing. When it came to identifying objectives, when I started doing feasibility studies, I used to revolve these all around revenue. In the first 12 months, what I've learned is that revenue is very short-sighted way of doing business. You want to look at something that is more long-term value, like eyeballs, like leads, like just general market acquisition. So in that, it could be, let's say, your recording studio. Instead of trying to say, I want to have, let's say, $50,000 of revenue in my first year. Okay, let's just say that's a number, or 100,000 because it's a round number. In order to get 100,000, there's a lot more that has to go into it than just throwing a number. You don't have much control over just throwing a number into the air. But instead, you can say, one of my objectives in the first 12 months is to introduce 5 new people to the studio every week. Okay. Now, of those 5 people, I'm going to anticipate 20%, so 1 out of every 5, will end up booking, on average, 3 days of recording time. Why is that the case? Well, that's another thing for lead generation and qualifying customers and target market that you can deal with down in the road. But all you need to know is that if you get 5 people through the door who are your target market, 1 in every 5 on average will book 3 days, which means if they're booking 3 days throughout the year, that's 150 days booked. 150 days times $750 a day. Well, there's your $100,000 a year of revenue. So it sort of gets reverse engineered. So you don't want to set objectives that you don't have any control over. You want to set tangible ones, especially in those first 12 months. But anyway, that's the first thing with objectives. Set goals for things that you can control, not necessarily just arbitrary numbers like revenue. That was a mistake I made really early on because I realized you can't really control that unless you have, or you reverse engineer it into systems and places of things that you do control. Next is finances. Okay, finances are really important. And when you start looking at the finances of your business, and this is something I don't know why I was just naturally good at this, I compartmentalized business finances to personal. So I see my studio, I see this YouTube channel, I see my educational side of sales, all as 3 different businesses and myself as a separate entity. Okay, so when it comes to finances, you need to look at what are the capital requirements for your business. Okay, so the laptop you own, is that your personal laptop, or is it the laptop that is part of the capital in the business? Okay, I'm just giving that as a rough example. So what capital assets and equity is already in that business? Okay, so we look at that. Then you go, what do you need to purchase? What do you need to invest into that business out of your own pocket in liquidity? So, how much money and cash do you have to take out to purchase things to make this business viable? So not just what's already there, but including on top of that, the cash that goes into it, because that as a bucket is the actual capital value of that business, is the laptop you have, the speakers you have, all that stuff that you need to operate that business is part of the cost or the capital that business is actually valued at. So that's where you start with finances, and those are hard expenses. The next part of finances are soft expenses, and soft expenses, I think I use that term loosely because some people talk about soft expenses, especially in self-employed business, as time, but I'm more referring to subscription-based and service-based expenses like your insurances, your phone, cloud services, internet services, any operational services or software packages you need to operate your business month to month. Those are soft expenses because that's money that gets spent and can't be reliquidated or reacquired. It doesn't sit on an asset or balance sheet. It just sort of goes out as an expense into the abyss. Okay, so you got your finances, capital investments, and then you got your finances, expenses that are recurring or soft expenses, as I call them, because it's just a churn or a constant churn of money that is happening month to month, which you have to account for in this feasibility study. But now we're talking about finances, we can start to look at revenue or turnover. Now, this is really important because we need to look back at some of our objectives we made. So our objective for how many people we have coming through the door, potential leads, potential sales, we need to cost. And when we cost it, it is always better to go hyper conservative on your costing in terms of not lowballing, but like as in being realistic and going, I'm not going to fill out every single hour of my calendar in the first year. Not going to happen. I might fill out 50% of it. Okay. And even then, I might be lucky some weeks and unlucky the others. So when it comes to costing, you have to be really realistic. And this is where setting up solid objectives in the business description, reasonable objectives, measurable objectives, and objectives that you have control over. Like that example I said, I'm going to bring 5 people through the studio a week, allow you to cost your services. So let's go back to that example. You're bringing 5 people new people into the recording studio a week just to show them around. One person on average books 3 days. Okay, so if you're booking 3 days a week, there's 52 weeks in the year. Let's say you take 2 weeks off. There's 50 weeks in the year. That's 150 days booked. You've got all your expenses listed out and you know how much your churn rate is each month on cash. And you know that you've got like a $3,000 cash burn rate each month. That's $30,000. And if you charge $750 a day for 150 days, that's $100,000. It's starting to look a bit more reasonable. Okay, so that's how you can start to price your stuff. You could even maybe price as low as $500 a day and have a lower profit margin, but a higher conversion rate on your leads coming in because you're not putting so much downward pressure on the demand by inflating the cost. So you want to know these things in a feasibility study. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take that projected revenue based on how much you're charging for your services, how many people might be coming in, based on some of your objectives you made, and then put that against your expenses, both your soft expenses and any capital investments you need to make when you're opening up the business. So you take your revenue for the first 12 months, take away your expenses, and then you have your net profit or loss. And your net profit or loss is going to dictate a lot about what you do. It's going to say, is this realistic? Can I sustain bringing 5 people into the studio a week? Are there even 5 people Are there even 5 people a week to bring into my studio in this city for 52 weeks straight? Are there even that many people interested in these services? And these are questions we look at when we do market research, which is the next part of the feasibility study. And we have to ask questions like, why would somebody even bother to buy your product or service? How will people become aware of your service? How are they actually going to find you? Where are you going to be? You're going to be on social media? You're going to be in the class fields? Like, where are you getting eyeballs and attention from? Is your service limited to your locality? So a recording studio would be because it's a physical thing. Or are you a mixing engineer that has a global market in terms of international? Or are you specifically geared towards a particular language type? Like if you work with Hispanic artists or Latin artists, you got to figure out, who is your target market on a geographical scale. So then once you figure out who does this business service specifically, then you can look at how is the competition in that market. So we're looking at market in general. So these are the people who could potentially buy my service, but they could also go to all these other places. So what are those other places doing? And this is where you do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you start looking at other businesses to see what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? Are there any unique defining factors of my service, my products that I can produce for the market that can bring in more leads, more clients for my business? And then what all that information does is, especially when it comes to defining your market, it gives you an idea of market size. So then when you've got your market size, you've got your business concept and objectives, and then also your finances. It's like a triangle that all feeds into one another. If your market size is too small that you can't achieve your objectives, well, then you have to retune your business objectives. Remember in the description, we'll bring 5 people into the studio a week. but you live in a town of 2,000 people, the reality is you're not going to find 250 people that want to be walked through a recording studio. It's not going to happen. You're going to retune your objectives, or you might look at your alternative services that might not be geographically linked, like mixing or remote music production or post-production editing. And then instead of making your objective to bring 5 people into the studio a week, you might go, well, I actually want to reinvest into podcast production and reach out to 20 podcasts a week in the hope of getting 2 regular podcast clients a week to service. And then you could scale that into your revenue projection and then go back through and go, well, what's the market for this? Oh, wow, there's some really low cut competition here in terms of low rate competition. It's going to be really hard to compete on this at scale. And then you go through those 3 triangles. You go through business objectives, finance, market, and then they all fit together. And anyway, I just thought I'd talk about the feasibility study because this is a study that has served me exceptionally well, and it's something I just thought I'd discuss. So if you've got any questions, leave them in the description below. I'd love to, just chat about it because it's a really interesting sort of field of knowledge and application, which is necessary in the music industry, but not a lot of people engage with because it's not as quote unquote sexy as of a thing to sort of discuss and engage in, or especially the way I present it. I don't present it with huge numbers like somebody like Alex Hormozy would, where he's got like hundreds of millions of dollars invested into companies that are operational at scale. A lot of the businesses in the music industry are solo run, face-to-face businesses where you're dealing directly with your clients who are the service provider. Like, you're the service provider, the client is literally the client. There's no real middleman there. And it's more grassroots sort of business. I just thought it'd be fun to share. I hope that you enjoyed this, and until next time, take care.